I'd like to call the village board meeting to order for Tuesday, April 28th, 2026. Roll call, please.
Trustee Service? Here. Trustee Paul?
Here.
Trustee Zerbal?
Here.
Trustee Atkinson?
Here.
Trustee Krieger?
Here.
Trustee Telford?
Here.
President Karneski?
Here. Please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please remember our men and women throughout the world in uniform. I have no changes to the agenda. I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. Number 5, comments from the public during the public comment period and pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 19.84, parent 2. Individuals must state their name and address. Comments are limited to items not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes. Personnel issues cannot be discussed nor individuals named. The board's role is to listen and receive information from the public, and the board is not able to take action at this meeting. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to say anything, comments about items not on tonight's agenda? Okay. State your name and address for the record, please. Hit the, so the green, there you go.
24 Zeke Probelski, 2455 Bay Area Place, Brown County Supervisor for District 21, Wards 1 through 8. I was reelected. I appreciate everybody that voted for me, and if you didn't vote for me, so be it. So, just want to say there's a time and a place for everything under the sun. Election's over. It's time for us to govern as a body. Reminds me of a song that was very popular in my day. It was done by a British group called the Byrds. The name of the song was Turn, Turn, Turn. It was based on the 3rd chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes out of the Bible. Let me just read a little bit for you, okay? There's a time for everything and a season, every activity under the heavens. There's a time to be born, time to die, time to plant, time to uproot, time to kill, and a time to heal, time to tear down, time to build, time to weep, and a time to laugh, time to mourn, and a time to dance, time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them, time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, time to search, and a time to give up, time to keep, and a time to throw away, time to tear, and a time to mend, time to be silent, and a time to speak, time for love, and a time for hate, time for war, and a time for peace, it's a time for an election, and there's a time for governing. Election's over, it's time for the county board to work together to govern for all of our residents and constituents of Brown County, and especially for Ashwaubenon. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Rick Van Lannen, 2673 Pioneer Drive, County Board Supervisor for District 22, which is Ashwaubenon Wards 9 through 12 and Town of Lawrence Wards 1 through 4 and 7. I just have a few things to talk about. In our last meeting, we reappointed Chairman Buckley and Vice Chair Castor to their positions again. I think we both supported that, and we're glad to have them as our leaders. After everyone was sworn in, we just had a few items, but most of our meeting was in closed session, which I can't talk about. So both Zeke and I have been reappointed to our committees. I'm on the administration committee. I think my background serves that committee well. And Zeke is back on the Planning, Development, and Transportation Committee and Land Conservation. Land Conservation Subcommittee. So I think we're both pleased to be on those committees and look forward to get going serving the residents. I also wanted to give a shout out to the Wendy, our village clerk. I think she did a great job on the election. And also the town clerk of the town of Lawrence, Cindy Colkin. I think they both did a great job. You know, the elections are always under, especially nowadays, under a lot of scrutiny, and I think they just did a wonderful job. And so we're lucky to have those folks on board, both Wendy and Cindy. So I'd also like to thank everyone's support for, you know, putting me back on the board. I'm also humbled and honored to have received the most votes of any other supervisor that had an opponent running against them. So I'm very pleased for that support. Okay, and you know, for those that didn't support me, well, I'll never know. So no worries there. And finally, you know, both Zeke and I, we don't have to come to these meetings, but I think it's very important that we stay engaged with both the village and myself with the town of Lawrence that I represent. And then we also make an effort to go to the school board meetings, to both the Ashwaubenon School Board, go to the West De Pere School Board, just to stay engaged and to help serve our residents as best we can, and stay engaged. And the more information we can share with each other, I think the better off the residents of not only Brown County, but the village of Ashwaubenon and town of Lawrence, districts 21 and 22. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Anybody else have any comments on items not on tonight's agenda? Any items not on tonight's agenda you'd like to comment? Hearing none. Number 6, written communications or announcements.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Just wanted to make a couple quick announcements, being that this is the last meeting, village meeting, before the month of May and before we get into heavy event season. Just a general reminder that the village-wide rummage sale begins on May 7th, 8th, and 9th. So it's going to be a busy weekend for rummage and thrifters alike throughout the community. But then the following weekend, I just want to note that the Luke Combs concert is planned for Friday, May 15th, Saturday, May 16th. The Epic Marathon then is scheduled for Sunday, May 17th. And in addition to that, the Whammo Dart Tournament is also coming into the community. I suspect, and this is very much speculation, but that week we might have more hotel occupancy in our area than we did for the draft. So it's going to be a busy weekend. Public safety is actively involved in planning and supporting all of the events that weekend, both the Whammo Dart Tournament at the Expo, Luke Combs at Lambeau Field, and the Epic Marathon. It should be noted that that week leading up to those events, we will be placing parking restriction signs that would match and model what is typically found on a Packer game day. So a lot of those no parking restrictions are relegated to Packer game days. Signage will be placed to support those special events. So if you live or park or are in the area that would typically be restricted for a Packer game day, those restrictions will carry forward on that weekend as well.
I would just like to add, if you've never gone to the Whammo Dart Tournament, there are so many people that are at the Whammo Dart Tournament, like massive amounts of people. So he's not kidding when he says that we will have higher occupancy in the hotels than we did for the draft. Very popular. Okay, anybody else have any communications or announcements? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to number 7, public hearing. 7A, public hearing on a proposed ordinance 04-5-26 regarding a second amendment to the planned unit development PUD overlay zoning for West Point Center at 460 Marina Lane, parcels VA-132-16, VA-132-13, and VA-132-15. Aaron.
All right, thank you. I will share my screen and give an overview of the request. All right, the requested second amendment to the PUD or Planned Unit Development Overlay at 460 Marina Lane is requested by Baymar Holdings as overall developer of the property. The original site plan that you see before you was for a community-based residential facility, which is currently under construction near Broadway. A 5-story 55-plus apartment building, and 6 senior townhomes along the river right here. The village board did approve that PUD. Following the approval, there was a request for an amendment to that PUD. So this is the first amendment, which was also subsequently approved by the village board, including the CBRF currently under construction. We have 2 3-story apartment buildings, and the townhomes along the river. So that is the currently approved PUD as it stands. Baymar Holdings has requested a second amendment to the planned unit development. Just again, the community-based residential facility, 42 unit right here, again, currently under construction. The 6 townhomes were removed and replaced with a 61 unit residential care apartment complex, or RCAC, along the river, and then an L-shaped CBRF assisted living, again, community-based residential facility, assisted living building right here, single story. It should be noted that there were the pool, pickleball court, so on and so forth, amenities were removed to accommodate the new development. Just for background, according to the Brown County Aging and Disability Resource Center, a CBRF, again, is a state licensed facility for 5 or more unrelated adults who need daily living assistance, which includes bathing, dressing, medication, monitoring meals, laundry, and health monitoring. So again, we do have the CBRF memory care right here, and the CBRF assisted living as proposed right here. The RCAC, or residential care apartment complex, offers adults independent apartments that typically have a kitchenette, living area, and private bathroom. Residents may receive up to 28 hours per week of supportive services, personal care, and or nursing services. To go through site plan review, did recommend approval of the site plan because, again, they are reviewing the site plan in terms of how it corresponds to our site plan review requirements. In terms of the phasing of construction, phase 1, again, the CBRF memory care under construction. The CBRF assisted living is to start in May of 2026, and the RCAC start in September of 2026. The Village Municipal Code for Planned Unit Development Review does identify objectives for each proposed PUD to meet. I'll read through those stated objectives, including promote integrated land uses allowing for industrial, commercial, and residential developments and public facilities along corridors and in transitional areas. Number 2, innovation in land development techniques that may be more suitable for a specific parcel than conventional approaches. Number 3, preservation and enhancement of important environmental features through careful and sensitive placement of structures and facilities. Number 4, provision of more adequate, usable, and suitably located open space, recreational amenities, and other public facilities would otherwise be provided under conventional land development techniques. Number 5, coordination of architectural styles and building forms to achieve greater compatibility with surrounding land uses. Number 6, promote a variety of living environments with a mixture of housing types. Number 7, creation of more efficient provision of public utilities and services, lessen demand on transportation, and the promotion of energy resource conservation. The applicant did identify their approach to meeting the objectives through the requested PUD amendment, and that is in your packet. It should be noted at Plan Commission, there was a concern from village staff regarding meeting Municipal Code PUD Objectives 6 and 7, regarding the similar housing types, supportive housing. And there was also some concern from public safety in terms of the provision of services. Should mention here the rendering overview, just to show, again, just an oblique shot of the proposed amendment. In terms of the Plan Commission action, Plan Commission did recommend denial of the requested second PUD amendment based upon the aforementioned concerns and conflicts with the listed PUD objectives.
Okay. Is there anybody who would like to make any comments about this, since this is a public hearing? If you would like to come up to the mic and state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. Good evening, afternoon, Madam President, members. My name is Ted Hunt. I am a representative of both Baymar Holdings and Greenwood Development, who are the developers for the project. I'd like to introduce Jessica Schmidt, who is the tenant for the project for the memory care under construction and proposed tenant for the balance of the proposal that we're looking to talk to you about tonight. Jessica is the owner and operator of Silverstone Memory Care, Inc. So please have a seat. All set. At the meeting on April the 9th, we had the opportunity to the Planning Commission to discuss some of the changes that have occurred and why they've occurred. And with the larger group today, we thought we would review some of those points. When we first looked at the land, oh, by the way, because of other travel and so forth, there are a number of owners of our project, both the total Baymar Holdings and for the memory care under construction, that are all residents of Ashwaubenon. And I would like to add that I am also a resident of Ashwaubenon, including my business is here in Ashwaubenon. So we're very involved and hope to be more involved. When we first looked at the property more than 2 or 3 years ago, we saw that it was what we thought to be prime property with the river. We took a look at the overall consideration that we wanted to put in place, which was essentially a seniors community of one way or another. We thought it was a wonderful area in terms of light traffic. It had the walking areas, it had the marina, restaurants, convenient to Oneida Street and all of the retail, convenient to other parts of Ashwaubenon and the greater Green Bay area. Airport highways, really in our mind a prime piece of property. We had been involved with Silverstone Memory Care and put together two opportunities for them in Appleton and have become very familiar with their work and they with ours. With that, we thought that the memory care project, which is here and under construction, and again, we thank you for your support on that, but we felt that the overall looking at the market within the greater Green Bay area, that memory care would be a good addition. It was essentially when we first came into Ashwaubenon, talked to people in the office saying we're looking for property. They directed us to this particular site right in the beginning. So we felt that we were, they had a good idea. We wanted to look at it closer, which we did, and ultimately were able to purchase that property. In the beginning, again, keeping in mind the senior community that we were looking at, we were talking about a 55-plus apartment building. Now, I know that Aaron has just described everything, but I am repeating some parts a little bit specific to our considerations. We were looking at the 55-plus. We thought it was a good size. Everything worked well. We were looking at 220,000 square feet, and I do apologize for a slight misstatement in the meeting of April 9th. I talked about approximately 200 units, but it was only planned for 124 units. It was 220,000 square feet. We also did have underground or first level parking. We also had built in, because of the community aspect, a lot of community rooms for exercise, entertainment, meeting, entertainment rooms, for instance, where the people would gather for such things as Super Bowl, particularly when the Packers play. So we thought that was going to work well for us. And then we had the 6 townhomes, which we were looking at very high-end finishes. Selling price was, because of other concerns, was in excess of $1.1 million. So that was a bit of a problem. We also added facilities, particularly a pool, common pool, and pickleball. What happened, and the reason we came back with that first amendment, there were a couple of minor detail concerns, and that had to do with Brown County and the access from Broadway, how we would get into the building, right turns, left turns, the whole works. We ended up with a one-way turn into the project, and we could also access it from Marina Lane. There was a slight repositioning of the memory care building as a result of that change. The biggest problem we had at the time was the mass of the 55-plus apartment building. The cost of construction was going out of whack, but more importantly, it turned out that we really felt that it was not a good building for that site. We had site problems particular to soil conditions, which the engineering companies had been working with prior to getting to that point of design, just a normal process for us. And they essentially said to us that we cannot really support a building of 220,000 square feet, that mass on that particular site, at that portion of the site. And that really came about from 100-plus years of silt being taken from the river and dumped there and other problems on the site. As it is, with the proposed building that we're looking at today, we're going to have to go down better than 22 feet with foundations. Normal foundations are down about 8 feet, and then the slab and then the building. So we're looking at extra work even as it is to be able to put in place a new building. We did reduce at that point from the 64 units, again, Aaron has described it, into the 2 garden apartments that were going to be 3-story and 2 buildings each. We did have to put in place at that point 2 large detached garages, and we relocated the pool and the pickleball court. Over the period following, with everything in the final preparation, we came up with a couple of problems. Number one, the townhomes, which we had arranged for pre-construction financing. We were under construction. We could not find any interest in the marketplace. We were using appropriate real estate brokers, people that were in the market for a long time, substantial players. We put our office into a position where it became a showroom for those townhomes. We had the different styles that we were preparing. We had all the finishes. We had everything we could do marketing-wise, good brochures, good support information, good interior information. We had no one attend the showroom. And that was 6-7 months worth of marketing by our agents. So on behalf of our ownership, the role that I had to take was we cannot position this that was going to be a problem both for the site, but particularly for the owner investors, really. We also, at that point, had a loss of profit that was expectation coming from the townhomes, which we were transferring into the balance of the property. So we learned from earlier and ongoing research, particularly the ongoing research, that in a reassessment of the site, what would be the best use? So here we are with our current request for a full site, community serviced property. So we are looking to change the townhomes and the garden apartments to the 33-unit residential care single story and the 61-unit senior living facility, which will be 3 stories. Of those 2 facilities, the 33-unit will be basically a duplication of the memory care now under construction. It will have all of the same services that the memory care people have, but the residents are anticipated to be having a lesser requirement. In other words, they're very independent. They can leave the site on their own. They can come back on their own. But what we did do was we reduced the services such as the pool and the pickleball court, which improved the overall use of the site. Again, making everything. Well, we didn't require it for this type of purpose. So in looking at really what we had, we had to make the changes based on market-driven considerations. And we looked at the growth of the senior communities right across the country, the whole country. It's happening all over. But most recently in Madison and Sheboygan, there are 2 new developments in those locations that are very much similar to what it is that we have here. The 3 types of facilities that can all work in communion with each other. So our growing needs really came about because our lack of interest in the townhomes, our loss of profit to contribute, our community-based uses for all the amenities across the project, and better land use as exterior recreational use was minimized. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Jessica, who is going to describe her operation, which is pretty unique in this northeast section of Wisconsin, if not maybe the whole state, in terms of the way in which she has evolved her business, the way in which she services the town of Grand Chute and Appleton with 2 facilities. She has another facility. I'm jumping in on her words. So, why don't you go ahead
Yeah,
and
okay,
please go
good
ahead and
evening.
describe it.
So, yeah, I'm Jessica Schmidt. I actually live in Plover, 159 River Drive in Plover, Wisconsin, so a citizen of Portage County. I'm joined tonight by my husband Brad back here. Thank you for giving the chance to speak with all of you today. We've had the opportunity to meet with Mary and a few of the staff here over the last week or so. We've had I feel, some very productive conversations, and I personally have come away with a much better understanding of your municipality and the concerns that have been brought up by council as it relates to the project request that Ted just described. Hopefully Mary and some of the village staff have learned about us and have shared some of that information with you. I'm not going to rehash all the details that we talked about, but I want to hit on a couple of main points that I hope will address any questions or concerns that you might still have. Starting with who we are. I mean, Brad and I have been married for 26 years. We have two daughters, both are Badgers College, UW-Madison. We have owned and operated senior care facilities going on 20 years now, mostly in Plover, which is our hometown, just south of Stevens Point. We literally live 5 minutes from that campus. I have a long history there, which I think you can read about me in your packet, but I was a caregiver there when I was 17 years old, managed those facilities, and then I ended up going on to graduate school. I worked for county government then, Portage County, for 10 years. Before then, we got into owning and operating. In the last 6 years, as Ted mentioned, we have actually built 3 facilities in the town of Grand Chute. 2 of the facilities are currently full with a waiting list, and the 3rd one we will be opening next month. We also have a waiting list for that. We have a great reputation for quality care. I personally attribute that to the very top with our management team. We have a team of about 15 managers or leaders who run and help operate our facilities. I am proud to say we have 0 turnover in our management team. In fact, a few of them have been with us from Plover for the last 20 years. This means that Brad and I have tremendous support and a structure below us which allows us to continue to grow and meet the demands of our aging population. As Ted mentioned, I think everybody would agree that the baby boomers are aging. We have potentially a huge issue on our hands with how are we going to take care of everybody. I recently heard the term silver tsunami is coming. We're going to have a significant amount of older people with early onset dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and that's where our expertise lies. The stability of our management team, and the reason I bring that up, is critical because it ensures consistency and continuity in how we operate. Any of you, and I know that there's a few that have experience with long-term care facilities, know how important it is when you call to check on a loved one that person answering the phone is somebody you know. It's a manager or it's somebody that has been there for a long time. And I can tell you that is not the norm in many facilities. There is such high turnover, not only in the frontline caregiver staff, and it is in every industry, restaurants, retail, so on, healthcare, but you can't have management or turnover in your management team. That's when a business has problems, and we simply do not. It also means that our policies, our procedures, our practices are implemented and trained by the same managers, the same way to all of our frontline staff across all of our facilities. That is only not a peace of mind for our residents receiving the care, but also for their families. When somebody calls one of our facilities, the person answering the phone, when you walk into one of our facilities, the person sitting in the office behind the desk is the same person that was there last month, same person that will be there 2 months from now and 2 years from now. And I can tell you, if you call my facility in Plover around 9 a.m. tomorrow, Kelly will answer the phone, and Kelly's answered that phone for 20 years. That's who we are as a business and a company. That's our management structure. This leads me to your concern. It is my concern, or my understanding, that the concern from council here is that by adding a senior care community, and by the way, your constituents, thank you for allowing us to proceed with the memo that's under construction, that this will increase the burden on your public safety system, and particularly EMS. I now feel like I have a good understanding of the Public Safety Commission. I have a very good relationship with the chiefs in town of Grand Chute, as well as Chief Deaver, who is in charge of EMS, and fire chief in the town of Plover. And I was talking to Mark Deaver the other day and told him I was presenting here, and I said Village of Ashwaubenon. He said, oh, they're the ones with the Public Safety Commission. You're very unique. Very unique. And as I learned recently, maybe one of the few in the country that are like this. So I get it. The personnel that you have, and as I understand there's about 50 of them, they're wearing so many hats. I mean, they're law enforcement, they're fire, they're EMS. It takes a special person and a special village to have that type of quasi-governmental structure like you have. I get that. And we want to support and collaborate with you. The last thing I want to do is sit up here and tell you that we're going to make their jobs any harder. I don't want to be the person that greets the paramedic at the front door of my facility only to have them say, oh, you called us 3 times again this week, here comes the ambulance again. That's not how we operate, and I know that we're unique, and that's not the norm. I believe in your packets you may have written testimony from Assistant Fire Chief Hannock, Town of Grand Chute, and then Fire Chief Mark Deaver. I asked them unsolicited, just say something about us, and they both wrote testimonies to their working relationship with us, which now is combined 26 years of working with us. And they both said, look, if they have to call 911, which we all do, we're all human beings, we all have needs, we do it responsibly and for the right reasons. We do not overutilize the system, we do not overburden the system. We problem solve in-house to prevent unnecessary and frivolous EMS calls and demands on your system. So take a minute if you can and just look at those comments. Again, real people that, officials that do work with us. I want to make a couple of points that will hopefully show you how we're different and how we believe we can be an asset to your community and not a further burden on your public safety system. First, just want to point out the majority of the residents who live in our facilities and who would be living in the senior care community that we're proposing have what's called a DNR. It's a do not resuscitate order in their charts, which means that they have, of sound mind and body, at some point in their life, chosen not to have life-saving measures. That's the majority of who we take care of and who would be living here. So if there was a medical emergency, we would know that they are a do not resuscitate. If we had to call a paramedic in, we would show the paramedic that paperwork, and the paramedic would evaluate them, but they likely would not be transported by 911, and they certainly would likely not be transported back to us in ambulance. Many of our residents also currently are, or they will be at some point as their life progresses, because we take care of people who age in place, they will be on hospice. And when somebody is on hospice, we never ever call 911. It's against hospice rules, federal regulation actually. So taking care of hospice residents and end of life right there mitigates any calls to 911. Secondly, and I'm still very shocked by this, I just recently learned that several of the senior care facilities here in Ashwaubenon, other communities around here, have very strict no-lift policies, which again stymies me. What it means, and I think this comes from a place of liability for the facility, it means if a resident falls, and we all know that one of the number one calls to 911 in our types of facilities is because somebody falls. They're in the dining room, they fall out of their chair, they're found on the floor in their room. To have a no-lift policy in those cases is ridiculous. We don't have that. In fact, we have the opposite. We have a how do we safely lift and transfer this person so we don't have to call 911. And I know in these facilities that have these no-lift policies, their staff sees somebody on the floor, first thing they do, panic, call 911, call the ambulance. I, honest to God, will tell you, we don't do that. And I'll give you some examples of how and why we don't. So we have resources, again, in our facilities. How do we safely lift and transfer? We use gait belts. We, of course, training, slings. We have wireless. We have equipment and trained staff that can pick a person up off the floor, transfer them to their bed or back in a chair. Easy peasy, no issue. We monitor them for injuries. Never a call out to 911. So the do not resuscitate, the hospice, the safe, how do we safely lift and transfer policy, should help right off the bat ease concerns about unnecessary calls going out to 911. Then we also have certain protocols that are very unique to how I operate my business. As I mentioned earlier, all of our facilities are run by one of the members of our Rockstar Zero Turnover Management Team. These 15 individuals that I mentioned that help run the facilities, most are nurses. All of them have experience or credentials. I require degrees, either college or associate degree in the long-term care field. All are on call 24/7. In those definitions that Aaron read earlier, those are state regulatory definitions. They don't require facilities like mine to have a nurse. However, we have nurses because we know who we serve, and we believe it's a common sense approach to taking good care of the people that we are responsible for. So what that means is when there's a medical emergency in one of our facilities, we're able to triage the problem first in-house using our nursing staff. So, resident on the floor, we use our training, we call in a nurse, we assess the situation, we evaluate, we use common sense, critical judgment before we would ever panic and call 911. Secondly, we work with an outside physician group called Bluestone Physicians. They are medical doctors and nurse practitioners, essentially like a mobile clinic. So like you or I would go to the doctor once a year to a clinic setting. Instead, Bluestone comes to our facility like an old-fashioned house call. They have their patients, our residents, right there. So they know our residents inside and out. So if a resident is having a medical issue, they're short of breath, they're having pain, they're having trouble lifting their arm, they're insulin-dependent diabetic, and their sugars are out of whack, we'd have our nurse triage it, our staff triage it. We would consult with Bluestone, medical doctor, who could write us orders and advise us right then and there. Their staff are also on call 24/7. So again, a second way to mitigate, our need to call out and call 911. If a resident truly needs to go to urgent care or ER, there are some things we can't do. We are a community care facility. We can't fix broken bones. We can't stitch people up. There's a laceration. We do have our own vans, our own transportation, including a wheelchair lift van. So as long as a person can sit in a regular chair or a wheelchair, we drive them to urgent care or ER ourselves. Now, if the person needs a cot or a stretcher or any equipment in an ambulance, that's not what we do. We would need to call the medical professionals. In this community, you have County Rescue, which is a private ambulance service. I know the concerns. I know they have long wait times. They only have 4 ambulances. We would call them first. If they're not able to help us, then and only then would we fall to your public safety EMS system. So again, do not resuscitate, people on hospice, safe lift protocols, our in-house competent trained staff, our triage protocols, partnership with the physician group, our own vehicles, community rescue. After all of those things fail, only and if they fail, then we would have to tap into your system. And I'm not going to say it will never happen. It would happen anywhere, whether in your own home or in a care community. So just a couple of final closing points. It's a fact that residents who live in our care communities are local. We currently care for 124 residents between Plover and Grand Chute. Of those, only 3 are from out of the area. Two are husband and wife. They came up from Chicago, and only because they have an adult child near a facility. The other moved up from Milwaukee because she too had an adult child near a facility. So people want to stay where they're born and raised and where their families are. People want to be in a care community close to their homes. The elders want that, and their children and family want this. By approving this project, our request, you're not adding more seniors or more burdens to this community. I would argue you're simply shifting where people live by allowing the options for seniors to move out of their homes, which may not be safe. I can guarantee you have a lot of senior citizens here in Ashwaubenon in their own homes who are not safe. They're leaving the stove on, which prompts the neighbor to call the fire department. Or Mrs. Smith is wandering 2 miles from her house again because she has early onset dementia and lives alone. Call to the police department. These things are happening in private homes. So why not allow a place for residents to move, a care community where that burden is on us? We provide the safe haven and the safe care, and we have the staff to do it. Ironically, and I know that all municipalities are concerned about growth, that would also free up houses for a younger demographic to move in if you provide a senior care community for your seniors to move out. So finally, by voting yes to this project, you are making a commitment to the aging citizens of Ashwaubenon, many of whom have lived here their whole lives, have raised their families here, have paid taxes, by allowing them to age in place in a safe community with caring professionals. By voting yes, you are making a commitment to families of Ashwaubenon that they can keep their elders and their loved ones close, visit more often, join them for birthday parties, be part of those final stages of life. And by voting yes, you are making a commitment to not send the aging citizens of Ashwaubenon to other communities like Appleton, Oshkosh, Grand Chute, and many other municipalities where these types of care communities exist and they're actually thriving and providing an excellent service for them.
If I may, I'd like to summarize a couple of other points, if I may. If you do not give us a positive response tonight, there are some, using one of today's favorite phrases, unexpected consequences. And as an example, if we have to look at a change, and because we still have the land, we still have a need to provide for our ownership group and for the area, some development on that site. Whatever occurs at the moment, there's a major difference. We have a tenant. And having a tenant means that we're in a position where we can do planned growth, plan positioning of these new buildings, creating the businesses as they go, and all the benefits that come about from the growth of new businesses in the area. You saw the renderings, and because of the dominance of a roof, it's not the best that we might come up with, but the three buildings are going to be new, upper end, good design, good finishes, landscaped properly throughout. They're close, they're going to fit the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is going to fit those buildings and the people that come to see their parents, come to see their brothers, sisters, whoever it may be. There are a couple of other considerations that come into play that can adversely affect what it is that we're talking about, mostly in time and finishes, if anything. As an example, once we have a tenant, we're in a very good position on the moving through. We have in place all of the necessary investors for the first building. We have our list that we just haven't completed for the second building, and we have a lot of interest already for the third. In other words, we're positioned properly. With that, we have an indication from lenders, all of whom, including this afternoon, a phone call about where are we. The bad side to this, if we go back to speculative building, in other words, we're going to create an apartment building that we would find out whatever the next best situation is, but we're going to be looking at higher interest rates. We're going to be looking at lower loan to value, and we're going to be looking at an overall higher cost, which gets passed on to the owners. It starts to limit the owners in terms of the development of interest. And I know I had a question last week about my position as dollars, but the dollars are what creates the facility for the operation that Jessica runs to come into play to help our neighborhood overall. And this really is an asset that's added. From a management point, we would have to take a look at outside management to come into place, just typical property management, and overall that provides additional or calls for additional costs. That has higher management costs. It is usually some outsider company and not necessarily the kind of quality that would come from whatever our involvement would be as direct owners and the involvement that Jessica's team has within the three buildings to have them all operating properly with just taking care of everything outside and inside. From a tenancy perspective, if we're not going forward with our original plan now, what we're looking at is potential vacancy. We don't have a vacancy for the next 15 years, plus another 5 years of options for the operation of Silverstone Memory Care, which means essentially 25 years that this building will operate without vacancies, and it will be servicing the neighborhood for the next 25 years, plus whatever may come on from that point. And at my age, I don't even guess what that might be, but.
So he's saying you're gonna be looking at me for the next 25 years.
So in that, for instance, when we're working with lenders and other people, we always have to put in a vacancy allowance. So we're looking at actual potential real costs that occur and costs that we have to provide for. And all that does, again, is add to the overall cost and the diminishing of the quality of what we can put in place. Simple example, arborite in the kitchens as opposed to quartz in the kitchens. And we're building this to the high end. Maybe that's not the best example, but it is an example of kinds of considerations that we have to put in place. And essentially, it's upgraded unit costs on everything. So, again, we're looking at this and hoping that you will look at it in the sense that we are not planning a burden on the facilities of the village, but we're looking at what will really be an asset for the village. We see this as a bit of a landmark. It'll be the first in this general area. It will have a good name, it will have good recognition, and it will be coming from the village. I don't think I need to say much more than that. We thank you very much for your time. We do have our contractors, Alliance Build and Design and Build. If you had any technical questions, we'd be also happy to answer any of those. So we thank you very much, and we thank you for the opportunity. And if you do have any questions, we're here.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so we can't,
It's not, that's right, I'm
Yep.
learning that lesson.
we can't interact at this. We wait until we get to the item. Is there anybody else who would like to speak about this project? You would? Absolutely. Okay.
I'm working to get out of here. With this, it was surgery a short time ago, and I must tell you, your EMS services were great.
State your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Jennifer Wellhouse, 2190 Center Street. I'm not good at public speaking, so bear with me here. I need practice. So actually, I not only live by this area, but I also work in the industry. And so having heard what they all just spoke about, I didn't even know this was on the agenda, but I just wanted to add a couple of things to this. She spoke about what we call the no-lift policy. And I thought it was kind of important because when I heard that you guys were gonna deny this, I was kind of disappointed. When you're talking about an RCAC in this area, I'm shaking, sorry. When you're talking about an RCAC in this area, it's something that this area really needs. And when she brought up the no-lift policy, when she's talking about when facilities are saying, if somebody falls on the floor and they are calling an ambulance to have them come and assisted up, she is spot on. And that is what I would call like a misuse of resources in the area. What's happening is when and I can't tell you who I work for, but what's happening is when facilities, and this is happening more and more, they used to have, like, they would help people up, but what's happening is they're no longer doing that, and they're saying we have a no-lift policy. So now they're calling the ambulances. So like if somebody needs like a Hoyer lift, which is also called a mechanical lift, in order to transfer, if that person goes down on the floor, they're now calling an ambulance. So now if anybody is in a wheelchair, we're having a harder time finding placement for that person. So if that person, if all of the CBRFs are full, we might have to move them to Appleton or in some cases, Milwaukee. So if that person's family lives up here in Brown County area and we're suddenly having to move them counties away because we can't find a placement for them here in the local area, and now you've taken them away from their family, you've taken them away from everything that they've known, that becomes a big problem. So if we can get facilities, and you're talking about a CVRF and a memory care unit and an RCAC on one property, that's gold. So I would really like you guys to consider that. Let me get back to my notes here because I had a couple other things. Sorry. And then the aging and dementia, she also mentioned how we have, you know, I think, can't remember what she called it, but, you know, we do have the increase with the aging and a higher case of dementia. I mean, that's pretty prevalent in our whole area right now. There's a lot of different trainings. I mean, we're all taking a lot more trainings on dementia. So again, when you have that memory care unit, I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with the new program that Curative just opened up. That's a day program. But again, we have so many full facilities right now. We're literally moving people out of the county. We're taking them away from their families. And so I guess just to reconsider, if you're going to deny that, that's 3 facilities we could have here in the area. So I don't know, I guess that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, would anybody else like to talk on this project? Anybody else like to talk on this project? Okay, I need a motion to close.
Motion to close the floor.
Second.
Motion and a second to close public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion, public hearing is closed. Excuse me. Number 8, action on consent agenda. A, consider, discuss, act on the open session and closed session minutes of the March 24, 2026 Village Board meeting. B, receive and accept the March 2026 Village Fund financial reports. C, receive and accept the March 2026 investment report. D, consider, discuss, act on a regular Class B beer, Class B liquor license for Green Bay 3919 Inc., DBA Applebee's Grill and Bar and IHOP, store number 88072. E, consider, discuss, act on the appointment of agent for Christ Oil Company, DBA Christ Food Mart, number 87, to assign Danielle Cherney as the new agent to oversee the store. F, consider, discuss, act on the budgeted expenditures for periods between 3/17/2026 to 4/22/2026. G, receive and accept the April 2026 Public Works Department report. H, receive and accept the April 2026 Parks, Rec, and Forestry Department reports. I, consider, discuss, act on proclamation recognizing May 1 through 7, 2026 as Elks Nation Youth Week. J, consider, discuss, act on proclamation recognizing Arbor Day 2026. K, consider, discuss, act on committee appointments for May 2026 through April 2027. If anybody wants to pull anything to discuss, we can do that. Otherwise, I need a motion to approve.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion is carried. Number 9, ordinances and/or resolutions. 9A, consider, discuss, act on a proposed ordinance 04-1-26, repealing and recreating Chapter 9, Criminal Offenses, Article 1, Miscellaneous Offenses, Section 7, Loitering.
Thank you, Madam President. At the request of the Green Bay Transit Director, the following ordinance amendment or repeal and recreate is being presented for consideration and adoption by the Village Board. This same ordinance was presented to the Public Works and Protection Committee earlier this month with recommendation for approval as well. Essentially what this does is it repeals and recreates the entire section, Article 1, Chapter 9, Article 1, Section 7, related to loitering. It removes certain key elements within the current code that identifies loitering that requires a warranting of an alarm or a safety consideration, largely tied to prowling, which is now better addressed under separate state statutes. It does provide or remove broad prohibitions on being present in certain public places without a clear conduct-based standard. So it really kind of narrows the focus of what loitering in a public place is by clearly defining. It focuses on the conduct that obstructs the pedestrian vehicle or other transit access. that we're trying to address. And it does give an option for officers to order individuals to move along before enforcement can happen. Essentially puts the ball in the court of the individual that may be loitering in public to essentially remove themselves from that condition so that enforcement is unnecessary. In addition to that, we have identified specific provisions related to transit stop interference to ensure that transit stops are being utilized by individuals that are waiting for a bus. Again, I think some of the concerns that maybe have been presented to the public in the past is that this is going to be an opportunity for public safety officials to lay a heavy hand or active enforcement for individuals that may be just simply waiting at the bus stop for a bus, but may have missed the previous bus arrival and now are waiting for the next bus or waiting for a series of buses, and that's simply not the case. What it does do is it removes individuals in situations at bus stops that may be taking long-term habitation or using those bus stops or shelters for other types of uses like bathroom facilities and other areas. In addition to that, it removes school ground language within the code that are better addressed under state trespass laws. It was just kind of unnecessary language. Ultimately, again, it ties to the direct activities or behaviors of individuals and not so much the individual themselves. So really focused on the obstruction of movement, the interference with business activities, or the interference with transit operations. Again, this update modernizes the village's approach to loitering-related issues. It targets specific behaviors rather than individuals' mere presence. It hopefully reduces any ambiguity for public safety and aligns better with current enforcement practices. The ordinance was modeled after similar ordinances that are found both in the city of Green Bay and the city of De Pere, both communities of which have fixed route services from transit that are better equipped with their ordinances to eliminate any loitering or transit-related interferences. With that being said, we did receive a letter from Terry Ruffsgard, who is the CEO of the NEW Community Shelter, and she did ask that I read this letter that we received from her for the record. A copy of this letter was placed at the dais for board members. It reads from Terry Ruffsgard, as you revisit the proposal for a loitering ordinance, I would like to offer a perspective shaped by my roles as a homeless shelter CEO and Green Bay Metro Transit Commissioner. When this was first discussed, the focus was narrow, sparked largely by the actions of one individual. Tonight, I ask you to broaden that lens. Consider our children, our elderly, and our neighbors with physical or mental disabilities. Every resident, including those experiencing homelessness, deserves to feel safe and comfortable in our public spaces. A loitering ordinance should not be viewed as a tool for criminalization. Rather, it empowers our trained public safety officers to initiate a vital conversation, one that includes a clear plan to move on. Our public spaces are not campgrounds, and our bus shelters should never serve as makeshift homes, storage units, or bathrooms. Allowing this to continue is not an act of compassion. It is a failure of our collective responsibility. To believe that doing nothing serves the homeless population is a mistake. The most effective thing we can do for someone in crisis is to ask why they are there. By establishing this ordinance, you give officers the framework to engage individuals, build trust, and ultimately enlist the help of professionals like myself to get them on the path to a better plan. We can and should do better for everyone in Ashwaubenon. Again, this, as I mentioned, was presented to Public Works and Protection earlier in the month with a recommendation for adoption. And with that, I'll answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions?
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 04-1-26 to repeal and recreate Chapter 9 Criminal Offenses, Article 1, Miscellaneous Offenses, Section 7 Loitering.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt proposed ordinance 04-1-26, miscellaneous offenses, Section 7 loitering. Any other comments, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 9B, consider, discuss, act on a proposed ordinance 04-2-26, amending Chapter 9 Criminal Offenses, Article 1, Miscellaneous Offices, Section 2, Possession of Dangerous Weapons.
Thank you, Madam President. At the request of one of our school resource officers, the attached ordinance amends a section of municipal code related to dangerous weapons. Again, I think you could kind of question whether or not the danger behind it, but ultimately what they're looking to do is add explicit references to weapons like airsoft guns, paintball guns, and gel blasters, along with the types of projectiles that would be commonly used with those devices. We have had some recent issues and concerns in relation to those devices, damage to property, injuries to persons, pets, and others. And therefore, the officers are asking for those weapons to be identified within code so that if they do become used in some type of activity that is damaging to property or persons, that a citation may be issued. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Seems like those people had some experiences with these type of weapons, so I'll move to approve ordinance 04-2-26.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to approve ordinance 04-2-26. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 9C, consider, discuss, act on a proposed ordinance 04-3-26, amending Chapter 4, Animals, Article 1, in general, Section 5, keeping of livestock and poultry regulated, D, goats and sheep.
Probably one of the most fun ordinances we got to work on this past month. Jacqueline Frank, the executive director from the National Railroad Museum, has requested that the village consider amendments to its code related to keeping certain livestock, specifically goats, to address environmental conditions at the museum. If you recall, we presented this code a couple years ago now, I think, in an effort to allow for entities to bring in goats as livestock to take care of and eat invasive species of plant material. And that's essentially what Jacqueline and the Railroad Museum would like to do. When we wrote the code, we wrote it where there would need to be a waiting period of 180 days between the usage of such livestock for those purposes, with the idea is that by having that large waiting period, they could have it for up to 2 times per year, and that it doesn't become a situation where livestock are being kept on the property. They're really kind of being brought in temporarily to remove the invasive species, and then they would be removed after 30 days. In talking with Jacqueline and some other users of these types of livestock for this purpose, being that we're in Wisconsin, our growing season is limited, really kind of begins in April and May, concludes sometime in October to maybe early November. And generally speaking, they can't fit in 2 mowing seasons, if you will, of these goats in one 180-day period. So essentially what this will do is it will reduce the waiting period to 90 days, but limit the number of permits for any particular parcel owner to no more than 2 per year. So effectively, you're still able to accomplish your goal of not having livestock permanently kept on property, but give an opportunity for property owners to bring on these animals twice per year to take care of the beginning and ending periods of the growing season here in Wisconsin. With that, I'll answer any questions.
I think a lot of other communities have that same program. The goats do a good job in keeping those blighted areas clean with their vegetation per se. So, no other questions, I'll move to approve 04-3-26.
I'll second. I like the goats.
I do too. I know they do them in the parks in Madison, and people actually go to the park to see the goats.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if I can say this for the record, but Tyler is gonna create a T-shirt that says "Goat Mow May," right? Goats Mow May. Is that what we're doing?
We've all ordered them already.
Yeah. So if you need a T-shirt, we're working on a design and we'll have something ready.
That's good.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance 04-3-26 about goats and sheep. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 9E, consider, discuss, act on, 9D, consider, discuss, act on a proposed ordinance 04-4-26 regulating recycling in the village of Ashwaubenon. Brian Rickert.
All right, so in front of you guys tonight, you have a repeal and recreate of an existing ordinance. Our current recycling ordinance was very, very outdated. So we've actually received direction along with all the other municipalities within Brown County and throughout the state to kind of rewrite that ordinance to better align with our actual operations. So if you looked at our current ordinance that we had on record, you know, it was very old. It had talked about actually bundling together your newspaper, and it was back when we actually had single stream recycling, or separated recycling, not single stream recycling. So you'd have your bins that you'd put out and you'd keep things separate. Now we have our large bins or totes that we just pick up, goes down to Outagamie County Recycling Center. They use AI robotics and then also people there to sift through our recycling. So what this ordinance does is it does kind of clean up things and allow them to better align with our current recycling operations. Then it also spells out those one-off unique things like appliances, waste oil, batteries, how to handle and manage those things. What do you do with those things? So with that, it's more of just a cleanup item. We do get a grant from the DNR every year to ensure that we do continue to recycle. So one of our qualifications to ensure that we're able to apply for that grant and qualify for that grant is to update our recycling ordinance.
Okay, any questions?
All right, I'll make the motion to adopt ordinance 04-4-26, repealing and recreating chapter 18, solid waste, article 3, recycling.
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt ordinance 04-4-26 with recycling. Any questions, concerns, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 9E, consider, discuss, act on a proposed ordinance 04-5-26 regarding a second amendment to the planned unit development, PUD, overlay zoning for West Point Center at 460 Marina Lane, parcels VA-132-16, VA-132-13, and VA-132-15. Okay, this is the item that we just discussed.
I'm going to be abstaining from this one because of my wife being the executive director of Woodside Senior Communities.
Okay. Any comments, questions for anybody?
No, I appreciate all the information that has been shared here tonight. It's still, I'm still a little baffled that we went from 6 units and it was gonna be a great project. When it was first proposed, we were gonna have 6 units. Silverstone was still gonna take care of the memory care, was gonna take care of the senior apartments, and that was a great project. It seems to me that all of a sudden we couldn't sell the $1 million condos, and we came up with another plan. And then we've kind of run down this path that, you know, oh, it's, you know, it's so needed in that. And I'm not gonna disregard the need. I mean, I've been through this with my parents, my aunts and uncles, over and over and over again. So I 100% understand the need, 100% understand, and I'm sure your facility is great and all the information that you provided. But we also have to look at the rest of the community that we have and what's the impact. And I still feel, and public safety was the one that presented that this was going to start to push them. Now, I'm not saying that we don't need more officers and that we shouldn't be expanding that, but I feel at this point in time, it's just, that facility is going to just kind of push us over the edge. That's my take on it, okay? I get it. And I think your facility is probably beautiful and fantastic, and I think your people do a great job. But I feel like we just switched because I gotta be honest with you, Ted, and I apologize, you know, to you for this, but it feels like because we couldn't sell those $1 million, those $1 million condos, we just switched now over to something else. I just don't think that's the right approach. We still are gonna have 2 beautiful facilities to support the aging in here in Ashwaubenon. I mean, we're gonna have the memory care unit, we're gonna have the senior apartments. I just feel that adding one more is gonna put additional burden on our public safety that, I don't feel I can support, and that's been based on feedback that we've received from public safety.
Madam President, may I comment on that?
We would have to open the floor. Let's wait just a minute. Ted, anybody else want to?
You know, I'm gonna agree with you, Jay, on that. Joel, I hate to put you on the spot, but, we know our chief is not here tonight, and Joel, can you add a little bit on what the chief's thoughts were? Did he have any conversation with you to give to us regarding his thoughts?
Yeah, and again, on behalf of the chief, due to a family emergency, wasn't able to be here tonight. But I think what I can share is likely to some degree anecdotal. Obviously, he has the hard data and the numbers. I think public safety's general concern, if I'm hearing correctly, and I would hope that everybody would agree, is to some degree the concentration of the types of facilities, not just CBRF or memory care facilities, but a variety of other providers in the community, and the propensity of call volume to those specific facilities. It just creates a significant burden to public safety. It's not, as I mentioned, it's not just the CBRFs, it's the volume and the degree of urgent care facilities in the community, the ambulatory and surgery centers in the community. Any of these medical facilities or these CBRF type facilities generate a higher degree of call volume than some of the other areas. So I think from their point of view is because of the concentration of these types of facilities in the community, it creates an increased demand and burden on the staff. And it really comes down to, are we going to adequately serve the entire broader community to the same degree that we would like to, because we're putting so much attention and emphasis on these select facilities that create a significant portion of the call volume.
I actually like the idea of having the progression from, you start out at an apartment, then you go to the assisted living, then you go to the skilled facility or whatever. That makes sense to me logically to have it all in the same area. My concern is the committee didn't recommend that we approve this. So I'm not on that committee, but I trust the committee format. They get all the information, they deliberate, they make a recommendation to the board. Would it make sense to have the committee look at this additional information that was presented today at the public hearing? Like put it back down to committee, or?
I think that's a reasonable option to send it back. I don't know if, what I would say to that point is there something you want them to specifically look at? Obviously, nothing has changed as far as the plan, other than a greater presentation on the operations by Silverstone.
Yeah,
So
I
if
think
it's just simply, we want you to look at this and have a better understanding of their operations, because they weren't present for Plan Commission. They did not give to the same degree, no offense to Ted, but they didn't give the same amount of information as to how they operate their facilities at Plan Commission as opposed to what they did tonight. As they had mentioned, they had met with Mary individually. They had met with staff this week to kind of talk through that. So I think that there is some options available to either delay action on the proposed ordinance, send it back to commission for review. My only thought is I would maybe ask the board to give some maybe direction that you want the planning commission to understand or review. Otherwise, if you just send it back, they're likely going to see and receive some of the same information, and I don't know that that's going to change a recommendation.
Yeah,
Okay.
and to answer your question, Kelly, a lot of this information, Ted did share a lot of it, not as well as Jessica did, trust me. I mean, yeah, and Ted, you did a great job, but I'm just saying, we definitely got more information tonight, but I can't say that it wasn't something that Ted hadn't expressed.
Right, and also, 3 of the members of Plan Commission sit on village board, so it would be the 3 citizen members So I don't know. My concern with this is, we had a great project, we had the townhomes, we had the apartment, the memory care, I already, like I said, I thought, putting it next to a haunted house was a little risky, but yeah, I'm not here to determine that, obviously you understand that. My concern is, this was, it had a pool, it had pickleball courts, it was active, and that is no longer. So the plan has changed so drastically, and then when public safety threw up the red flags, so, that's my concern.
And I understand, I just can't see bringing it back. I think they did a good job on presenting it. I don't know where they can go with it any more than what they've done. My concern is the 17,000 people we gotta take care of. We do have some of those, facilities within our community, and our public safety naturally knows what they're talking about. It's a burden onto them. I've been associated with, my mom, who lived in one of these facilities for a while. I did not see if one ambulance for the number of years that I shouldn't say number of years, she was there 9 months really, but I didn't see any emergency vehicles in there at all, and I was there quite a bit with her. So I think what we're looking at is basically keeping our community safe with the number of people we have in our safety department, and not throwing any extra burden on them by adding a unit like this.
Well, and we already are adding more,
I don't think we're ever at full capacity. We're all, people are retiring, we get new people in, so are we ever at full capacity?
we're already, we're adding the memory care unit, we're adding the senior apartments, so it's not like we're just saying absolutely no. I mean, we are expanding, we're just saying, hey, can we scale back and not do this other unit, is basically
Yeah,
what we're saying.
if I could just interject. Yeah, I think I'll address it, Ted, if that's okay, since the floor is not open. But I think there's a misconception that currently the memory care building is under construction. That was approved as part of, both the original and the amended PUD. The apartment living is not included in the amended PUD that's before you tonight. So what they're essentially looking to do is replace the condominium townhomes and the apartment building that was a part of the first amendment. By replacing the apartment building with an RCAC, which will act very similarly to an apartment style living, but with some part-time care, if you will. And then the townhomes, if you will, albeit the layout's different, the townhomes would effectively be replaced with an assisted living facility. So, and I'll just kind of touch really briefly on process. So as it currently stands, there is an approved PUD with amended PUD for this site, which includes the townhomes, the smaller apartment building, and the memory care. In the event you deny the request for an amended PUD, that existing PUD still stands. It doesn't eliminate that. And the reason why I bring that up is that there could be opportunities that the board may wish to discuss with the applicant then, alternatives. So maybe this amendment doesn't work for you, but are there alternatives that you may suggest, knowing that they could come back with an amendment that would satisfy the board? So don't look at it as a yes or a no or a black and white condition. They already have a yes on one thing. What they're looking to do is amend that to make it more financially feasible for them. We know that. Nobody's stating otherwise, clearly. In addition to that, recognizing that there may be disinterest from the board for the existing amendment, are there other things that you would find interest in that you would recommend then to the developer, and then they could come?
And I think that's a fair point, Joel. I mean, I think from my position, to expand out the senior apartment complex and then add back in the active part of it, I think would be great. I think that might be something, that, you know, we definitely would be, more interested in.
Did you want to open the floor and have a dialogue with them?
We can do that, but, so I'll
Can I-
make a
can I-
motion to open the floor.
Can I jump in before
Okay,
we
just a
open the
minute.
floor?
Go ahead,
I just
Chris.
had a couple thoughts on this. The original agreement we made was, I think, in the best interest of the village, what we thought we needed as a partner for the village. And then what was presented tonight goes a little extreme for me, like a lot of the other board members said. What I had trouble with, a couple things, was all of a sudden, we have an issue with the soil being able to handle the load of the buildings that were proposed, and then not being able to sell townhouses. On a project this magnitude, I would think due diligence was done. And all of a sudden, we've got issues here. And on top of that, all of a sudden, twice I heard our active seniors were considered burdens. Something just doesn't sit right with me combined here. Having said that, I agree, I'm willing to listen to something else too, that might come forward. I'm not closing my mind to it. Those are just my thoughts.
So, did we want to open the floor and we can have a dialogue with them so they can
Excellent.
understand?
I'll make a motion to open the floor.
Second.
Motion and a second to open the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Motion carried.
Do I reintroduce myself?
We know who you are, Ted, but we need to know,
I'd
and
like to
he,
introduce Jamie Sprudels, who is with you. Go ahead.
and he will need to hit the button on his mic. Thank you.
Yep. Jamie Sprudel's Lions Construction Design, 1919 Hillcrest Drive, Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Okay.
If I may try, in some of the order that we've just had the comments, the consideration of we had the townhomes and then we didn't have the townhomes. I really would like you to understand that we spent close to a year, an awful lot of investment money in terms of the preparation of not only of the design, but the support material, the marketing material, the costs that we incurred with public marketing through our brokers. We made a very major effort. Now, I've been in real estate, both from a brokerage through to consulting, through to the development work for a long time. I don't want to tell you how old I am, so I've been around for a long time doing this. Every effort was made to make these townhomes good within the market. We were pricing the properties. We were building approximately 2,200 square feet, and we were in the $1.1 million. The condition of the soil and that site was such that we were adding costs that wouldn't normally be found in other locations, other very typical away from the river locations. So we were battling that from the beginning. Whether or not it was the pricing that kept people away from looking at the townhomes and being interested in them, we're not sure, because we couldn't get people in to see it. Did the price keep them away? Did the fact that they were not built yet, in other words, we had to have people buy from plans, that's always difficult. But we were not in a position to be able to spend, in that case, $5, $6, $7 million to put these townhomes in place to see if they would sell. That's just practical business considerations. And it would have hurt the village if we had contribution to a bad or a negative like that. So we had to be careful, and we also had to be careful because of our fiduciary responsibility to our owner group. And that was a very major consideration. In terms of the meetings that have gone on, I have to apologize in a sense in that the plan meeting that we had on April the 9th, the information and the opportunity to bring Mrs. Schmidt along and join us for providing that information earlier on in this process, that was mine. I didn't organize that. Because of the way we've been able to operate with you earlier, I guess I just didn't understand that it was going to be something at that level of importance, and I should have. I apologize for that. If we can continue the dialogue, having the additional information that Mrs. Schmidt has brought along, then that would be very good for us. So I hope we understand that the townhomes just didn't disappear. There was a lot of work that went into that. In terms of the major building, and due diligence. We spent close to a year from an early look at the property to the point of purchasing the property. And we received from the previous owners, and there had been a number of them over time, or at least my understanding, they were their own different partnerships. But we got a stack of paper like this. What didn't come in all of that was soil borings. We were at a point of all of the work that had to be done that we were then in a position to close, but we looked at our engineering and the work that Alliance can do, and Jamie can better describe some of this. But as we progressed throughout the site itself, from the Broadway area down to the waterfront to the area in the middle, had different considerations as to the soil and what had been put in place. And we had looked at pictures that went back years and years and years of different levels of that site as it built up and what had been used. There had been games parks there, racing parks, water considerations, all kinds of situations. Nothing indicated that we would have that problem until we were well into the process. Another situation, why would we try and put 220,000 square feet? And you know, the hotel is right there. You could argue, well, they did the same. They're using the same, what's called rigid inclusions that we were planning, but they were closer to Broadway than where we were. And everything from the engineers was that we should not be building a 220,000 square foot building in that location. The site itself wouldn't accommodate that larger building anywhere else in the same fashion. So just going back for a moment, if we can again say, are we looking at the approvals or the way Joel's been describing it? We know the memory care is under construction. If we can work on the previous amendments that the apartment building is acceptable, then we can change our whole scheduling and come back and see you in a year and a half and say we're ready to consider the third building having better information on our position in terms of calling on the services of EMS. And in terms of using the word burden, the only term of burden had nothing to do with the population that we would bring in. The burden was, are we going to be a burden on EMS or on the public safety? And a lot of what we have looked at and considered in the operations, I use the word, we won't be a burden, we in fact should be an asset for the village, bringing all this together. 55 plus are not major people to be swimming in a pool constantly. That was for when we were looking at department moving more to a younger version. We started off with 55, but because of the size of the original, the activity levels are there. We still have room to put some in. We can reassess that if that becomes something that we should look at. So maybe we can even accommodate very quickly that we're under construction with one. We can get started with the apartment building, the 3-story. It would have to be in the location of the apartments. They're just not going to. We can't put our ownership group into that position, but we can adjust and come back and work with you on the third building, whatever it should be, that will best service that facility.
So let me get this right. So what Ted is saying is that he would keep what has been proposed so far of the apartment building. And, well, it has 2 apartment buildings and the townhomes. So he would start on one apartment building, but he would rework the rest of the site? Doesn't he have?
So I think Aaron's he probably has it up on the screen, what was the amended PUD, and I think he'll eventually show it. But essentially, as long as they're complying with the current approved PUD, the amended PUD,
Right.
they have the approvals in place already to move forward with that.
Okay, so this is the currently approved plan unit development. So this was approved as the first amendment to the PUD. As noted, this is the CBRF memory care facility currently under construction. There are 2 3-story apartment buildings or garden apartments, as been referred to. We have one here, the northeastern part of the property, one here in the southern part of the property, and we have detached garage here and here. And you see the pool, barbecue area, picnic area here. So again, if they were to start construction, let's say on this apartment building here with these garages, or this apartment building, again, as long as they maintain consistency with the approved site plan from the First Amendment, they can move forward with that as approved, provided get building permits, plan approval, so on and so forth. Building plan approval. But any deviation from the approved amendment, First Amendment, would require resubmittal of another PUD amendment to reflect any proposed changes.
I think we're at the position of not quite understanding where we would end up tonight. If we're in a position that you will accept the most recent amendment request, which has the 3 buildings, memory care under construction, the 3-story apartment building in the location of the townhomes, and then the in between the next care level, assisted living care level for the central building. What I was suggesting a few moments ago, that if you were going to approve that, but would still like to work with us a little bit, we could just change our level of construction schedule, move to the RCAC building on the waterfront, leaving the central portion to be constructed dependent on, and we could put this as part of the condition, dependent on showing you through the completion of the memory care, the completion of the RCAC, that we are going to be operating at a level that's nothing but advantageous to the village. We're not going to be overusing services. We're going to be working properly, probably.
But Ted, you could do that
That's
same
not-
thing with
yeah.
this PUD.
That's not what's.
You don't need to
what's-
approve a new PUD to do that. You could
the whole
work with this one, right?
Almost. The preference of what we have now to increase or improve the facilities of these garden apartments, which were going to be very typical garden apartments, with putting in the facilities that we would like to put in, which are the services that provide more for the senior living care. So not care, sorry, senior living community, where we're going back to exercise rooms. We're looking at more lounges. We're looking at a chapel. We're looking at a community dining area. We're looking at a community, different areas where the residents gather. But we would still have apartments of 1 and 2 bedrooms, kitchens, 1 and 2 bathrooms, facilities for laundry care. To do all of that, what we really need to do is go back to the current plan that we've submitted for the building along the waterfront. It moves slightly to the north.
So what, let me clarify this. You are saying that the plan that you had sent in for this second amendment
Yes.
is what you want us to approve, but it wouldn't be, because right here it says RCAC and assisted living on each of the buildings, so that's where I don't think,
Yeah, I
It
don't
would be
feel
approved.
comfortable with that.
Well, that's what, we've been using different terms for the same thing, so if you're looking at the 3-story apartment, the most recent amendment that we have submitted for your considerations tonight includes the 3-story apartment building being moved along the river, where the central building would be a single-story 31 unit. The one along the river would be 61 units. Those two together are approximately 60 units. So the coverage is the same, it's just a realignment that we're looking at. What we're really trying to do here, folks, sorry, I shouldn't call you folks, but what we're really trying to look to is a lot of our research has developed where we're at today, but if we can accommodate your needs or requirements by making those minor changes, then we can come back with the minor changes and show you how well they're going to work. And we will get away from the additional assisted care that you're concerned with.
but wouldn't he,
I think,
Yeah,
I think we should table this then.
Yeah, what I would offer is, I think what's being kind of discussed on the floor probably needs some more formalizing as far as written plan
Right.
and just confirmation with the site plan. So our recommendation would be postpone action on this You can certainly direct staff to continue to work with the development team. We can formulate whatever that plan looks like, both on paper and in writing, and represent that. My request would be, I think what would be appropriate to Kelly's point is if there are gonna be some changes, as in that RCAC being switched to more of a garden-style apartment along the waterfront, that's kind of changing the use. I'd run that, I don't think we need to necessarily go through a full application process, but let's go through the procedures of going back to Planning Commission, having that presentation, having that discussion, and then that ultimately will come back to Village Board. If that is agreeable to the board, and hopefully that's agreeable to the development team as well. But I think talking about it over the floor, there's a lot of nuances here that are probably being misinterpreted, and I think it would be appropriate to get it on paper and walk through the procedure again.
It sounds like 2 out of the 3 buildings the committee agrees with. And it's just that 3rd building that we have to hammer out some sort of agreement on. Should be doable.
So I guess at this point, I will make the motion to close the floor so we can
Yes.
formalize this.
Second.
Is there a second? Motion and a second to close the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Floor is closed. Okay,
So
now,
I will make the motion to table this item and direct staff to work with the development team and the Silverstone Group to work out what the new site plan should look like.
okay, we have a motion to table this item.
We need
There's
something else
second.
there?
No, I would just, motion to postpone action.
Second.
Yep, motion to postpone action on the PUD amendment for back to Planning Commission for ultimate recommendation.
For back to Planning Commission, right?
Okay. Kelly's a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to postpone action on this and send it back, direct staff to work with the developer and send it back to Plan Board. Everybody understand? Because once we say yes, then that means we can't talk about it anymore. Okay? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. This item is tabled. Okay. 9F, consider, discuss, act on a proposed ordinance 04-6-26, repealing and creating section 9-1-1, ordinance violations and offenses against state laws subject to forfeiture of Chapter 9, Criminal Code, Article 1, Miscellaneous Offenses.
All right, thank you, Madam President. Our village attorney, a public safety investigator, a municipal judge met to review our current code and discuss ordinance violations and offenses against state law that are subject to forfeiture. In your pocket is the ordinance and bond schedule with highlights that outlines additional references to state statute that can be issued through municipal citation. As an example, concealing or carrying a concealed knife, invasion of privacy, representations depicting nudity, theft of mail, fraudulent data alteration, theft from a financial institution under $500, and fraud against a financial institution, and by reference, that's for under $500, along with causing violence or breach of peace by damaging or destroying a U.S. flag, are incorporated in the proposed ordinance to be included as citable offenses. The reason for this, many of these cases, if they do require prosecution, can often be referred to the district attorney for prosecution in circuit court. At times, the district attorney may not take on cases of lesser significance, but no less, these are violations under state law and do pose a safety risk and concern for the community. So oftentimes, these cases can be cited municipally, so as to defer, or not to defer, but to mitigate and prevent these cases from occurring in our community. And then they're more or less taken up through municipal court, and the judge is able to hear those cases and determine guilt and responsibility. So with that, those are the additions that are being proposed, again, by public safety and the municipal court judge. There were other issues that were identified in our meeting, but it was determined that those issues are best resolved at the circuit court level. In particular, those were related to sexual crimes against children and those types of situations. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance, O-4-6-26, repealing and recreating section 9-1-1, ordinance violations and offense against state laws subject to forfeiture of chapter 9, criminal code, article 1, miscellaneous offenses.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance 04-6-26. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 9G, consider, discuss, act on a proposed resolution R 4-1-26, updating the village fee schedules. Joel?
Thank you, Madam President. This resolution adopts an amended fee schedule for certain application fees that are related to ordinances that have been recently adopted by the village board. The first one is the escort license. The fee is proposed to be $350 for application. This is consistent with other business licenses in the village. In addition to that, it removes the massage technician license that had been previously incorporated into code and was later repealed. However, it does establish the massage establishment license at $350, and then it also adds a $15 provisional alcohol beverage retail license. This is not the same as the provisional operator license, but for a retail establishment. As an example, an establishment that had been operating previously in the village had some issues with its seller's permit and therefore ran out of compliance with the alcohol laws. By having this fee incorporated and adopted within code, we're able to essentially provide a provisional license while they await the actual village board determination for the permanent license. The $15 fee is the maximum fee that can be charged in accordance to state statutes. That's why the $15 fee is established here. With that, I'll answer any questions.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution R 4-1-26, updating the village fee schedules.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt resolution R 4-1-26. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 9H, consider, discuss, act on a proposed resolution R 4-2-26, amending the bond schedule to be used in municipal court of the village of Ashwaubenon for non-traffic violations. Joel?
Thank you, Madam President. This resolution is a companion resolution to the ordinance 04-6-26 related to the updated schedule of violations under state law criminal offenses. In addition to that, recently Wisconsin state law adopted this past year allowed for an increase in court cost from $38 to $48. The bond schedule in your packet takes into account this law change and increases the court cost to $48. It incorporates the offenses that were previously adopted under ordinance 4-6-26, and then amends a few of the bond schedule fees for various ordinance violations to be consistent with one another. Primarily, we had things like certain offenses under theft might have been one element of theft might have been a $100 bond schedule, another element of theft might have been a $300 bond schedule, and so there was an effort made by the village attorney and municipal court judge to make those bond amounts consistent so that it was easier to administer from both a citation situation but also a municipal court process. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution R 4-2-26, amending the bond schedule to be used in municipal court of the village of Ashwaubenon for non-traffic violations.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution R 4-2-26. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10, other items of business. 10A, consider, discuss, act on a planning option agreement with Slinde Realty Investments for parcels VA-90-4-10 and VA-90-4-9. Aaron?
All right, thank you. As you can see up on screen, thank you, Sarah. This is a request for basically a 6-month planning option for the 2 parcels the village owns on Marvell Lane between South Oneida Street and Element Way with Slinde Realty Investments. They have developed the element apartments, previously buildings 1 through 4, on the east and north sides of Element Way. They are working with the adjacent property owners to the subject properties to put together a development package for a new building, including the subject properties. So in order to conduct their financial and site analysis of the project, they would like a 6-month planning option where they can hold the properties, and we would not sell them to another entity. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, questions? Or I'll entertain a motion.
A motion to approve the planning option agreement with Slinde Realty Investments for parcel VA 90-4-10 and VA 90-4-9.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the planning option agreement with Slinde Realty Investments. Any other questions, concerns?
Only other question I'd have, we have any other interest in this property at all?
Not currently, no.
Okay, thank you.
Been available for a number of years, but
Yeah,
somebody
I
has
know.
had it under a previous development agreement. They've had an option on the property.
Perfect.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10B, consider, discuss, act on a request for qualifications for architectural and engineering design services for Public Works Garage expansion. Joel.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. As you know, last year we completed a facility condition assessment and needs analysis for both Village Hall, Public Works, and Public Safety. Coming out of that study, the recommendation is that the first priority for the village is to begin an expansion and facility renovation project for our Public Works facilities. A dollar amount was set aside for what would be effectively called Phase 1 in the 2026 budget, which really ultimately takes into account the design and engineering of an expansion. Also, the development of specifications for a variety of renovation projects like roofing and things of that nature. So the 2026 budget includes $4.7 million for what will effectively be Phase 1. This particular project to do the actual architectural engineered designs for the eventual project, it is estimated to be about 1.5 to 1.7 million, which is roughly 7.5% of the total cost of construction for the project. We obviously have a relationship with an existing architectural firm, but in accordance to village policy and procedures for purchasing, we do need to go out for a formal request for proposals or qualifications. In your packet is a draft copy of that request. If approved by the board, we would notify qualified firms and openly solicit qualified firms for submitting a request or submitting their qualifications for consideration. We would then have an internal team, once all the applications have been received, we would review, interview, and solicit additional information internally with staff to determine a recommendation that we would then present to the village board. Ultimately, the board would determine and authorize the execution of a contract to do the architectural engineered services. As the qualifications specifications have been identified for you, a large part of the activity will be done internally with a final recommendation for village board. If the village board would like to play a more active role in both interviewing and scrutinizing applications or qualifications, we can certainly do that as well. But based on past experience, this board hasn't played that active a role in it. But we can certainly do that where in a future meeting, the board would interview a set designated number of qualified firms that have been vetted prior to final determination. With that, I can answer any questions that you might have or take any feedback to modify the RFQ prior to disseminating that to qualified firms.
Yeah, I don't see any need for the board to get involved in that. Staff knows what they want. They're the ones with the feet on the ground, and I don't know that we add any value to that process by us being involved. So I'll make the motion to approve the draft request for qualifications and direct staff to solicit qualified firms to submit proposals for the village board consideration and possible selection.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to approve a request for qualifications for architectural and engineering design services. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. 10C, consider, discuss, act on bid award for the 2026 Bituminous planing and paving contract. I
Also,
like to say that word. but
Yeah.
It took me a lot of years to,
Also commonly known as, we call it mill pave a lot of times.
There we go.
Or just pavement maintenance. Steve put a nice spin on engineering terminology in here, which no one likes to deal with that. So anyways, in front of you guys tonight, is our normal pavement maintenance, what's commonly referred to as mill pave. We go through and rate all the roads throughout the village every spring. Then what we do is we go out and we solicit bids, for the project. We always generally receive 2 bids because there's only 2 contractors within the area that have the abilities to perform that scope of work due to the size of the work. We did receive 2 bids. You can see the bids ranged just above and just below $1 million, with Northeast Asphalt being the lowest responsible bidder. Both contractors have performed work here in the village, and they are responsible and have performed the work. So with that being said, I'll open it to any questions. You'll see attached to that agenda item are the roads that we plan to repave this season. Most notably, Armed Forces Drive and then some streets within Waterford area, streets kind of on and around Santa Barbara. But with that, I'll open to any questions that you guys may have.
any questions, or I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the award for the mill paving and blacktop for amount of $998,855.50.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the awarding of the 2026 Bituminous planing and paving contract to Northeast Asphalt in the amount of $998,855.50. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Motion carried. Number 11, agenda items for next meeting. If you have anything, give the office a call. We'll get it on the board. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed. Motion carried. Thank you.